wilderness is a paradox, a tapestry woven from threads of allure and dread. It sings a siren song of freedom, where the rustle of leaves underfoot and the sigh of wind through ancient boughs promise refuge from the clamor of modern existence. Yet, beneath this serene facade lurks a pulse, ancient, watchful, and unforgiving. These are not mere stories, conjured to chill by firelight, but raw, trembling testimonies carved from the hearts of those who dared to tread too far into America's untamed realms. From the shadowed pines of New Jersey to the desolate cliffs of Utah, these accounts unravel the delicate veil between man and the unknown, revealing a truth as stark as moonlight on bone. Some places are not ours to claim. As you immerse yourself in these narratives, pause and reflect. Would you dare to park your RV in these forsaken wilds, alone with the night? What would you do if the silence turned to screams? In the fading glow of late summer 1997, Daniel Reese, a man whose lean frame and weathered eyes spoke of years spent chasing solitude, steered his RV toward the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. The Barrens were a world unto themselves, a vast, labyrinthine expanse of sandy trails, stunted pines, and bogs that seemed to drink the very sound from the air. Local lore clung to these woods like damp moss. Whispers of the Jersey Devil, a cloven-hoofed terror said to haunt the night, and of wanderers who vanished into its maze, their fates unwritten. Daniel, at 36, had no time for such tales. "The woods are just trees," he'd say, his voice steady, though a flicker of caution danced in his gaze. His quest was for the overlooked, a forgotten campground, swallowed by time, where nature had erased man's fleeting mark. His companion, Josh Harper, was a contrast in every way, broad-shouldered, with a laugh that could cut through fog and a restless energy that thrived on challenge. Friends since high school, they shared a bond forged in reckless youth, though Josh's bravado masked a wariness he rarely admitted. As the RV rattled down a narrowing dirt road, the pines closed in, their needles brushing the vehicle's sides like skeletal hands testing its resolve. The air grew heavy, scented with resin and earth, as they arrived just before sunset. The sky was a bruise of purple and orange, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe across the ground. The campground was a ghost town. Rusted picnic tables sank into carpets of moss, fire pits choked with weeds, and splintered signs bore names long faded. "This is it," Daniel said, stepping out, his boots crunching on gravel, the sound sharp in the stillness. Josh scanned the tree line, his grin faltering. "Feels like we're trespassing," he muttered, half joking, though his eyes lingered on the darkening woods. They parked the RV at the clearing's edge, its white exterior a stark intruder against the green. Setup was a ritual. A fire pit ringed with stones scavenged from the earth, 2 folding chairs creaking under their weight, and a cooler stocked with beers that glistened with condensation. The canopy above wove a lattice of branches, filtering the dying light into slivers that danced like specters on the ground. As dusk deepened, the fire's glow carved a fragile sanctuary, its crackle a defiant hymn against the forest's hush. They swapped stories, pranks pulled in high school halls, girls who'd broken their hearts, their voices rising to fill the void, as if to prove they were not alone. But the woods listened, their silence growing denser, a weight that pressed against their laughter. "You think anyone else knows this place?" Josh asked, his eyes fixed on the flames, their flicker mirrored in his pupils like tiny warnings. Daniel shrugged, sipping his beer, its cold bite grounding him. "Doubt it. Most don't come this deep. That's the point." But Josh's fingers tightened around his can, his gaze drifting to the trees, where shadows seemed to shift, not with the wind, but with intent. A rustle broke the quiet, faint, like leaves stirred by something heavier than air, deliberate in its cadence. "You hear that?" Josh said, voice low, his body tensing as if braced for flight. Daniel paused, ears straining, the fire's snap and the wind's sigh the only replies. "Just the woods," he said, though a prickle of unease crawled up his spine, cold as the night's breath. By midnight, the fire had dwindled to glowing embers, and the chill drove them inside. Josh locked the RV's door, a city habit Daniel ribbed him for, though tonight it felt less like a joke. They settled into sleeping bags on narrow bunks, the forest silence seeping through the thin walls, a weight that made the air feel alive. Daniel was drifting off, lulled by the hum of quiet, when a sound tore through the stillness. A knock, soft but unmistakable, on the RV's door. He bolted upright, heart thudding in his chest, the darkness pressing against his eyes. "You hear that?" he whispered, his breath clouding in the cool air. Josh was already awake, propped on one elbow, his face a mask of alarm. "Yeah," he said, voice barely a thread. They froze, staring at the door's outline, a darker shape against the black. No one could be out here. No headlights had pierced the night. No engines had growled through the maze of trails. The nearest town was a distant memory, 40 miles of twists and turns away. Another knock came, louder, 3 precise taps that seemed to vibrate in their bones, each one a question with no answer. Daniel grabbed a flashlight from the counter, its beam trembling as he aimed it at the door, the light swallowed by the RV's interior. "Maybe an animal?" he offered, but the words rang hollow, a lie to himself. Josh shook his head, his face drained of color. "Animals don't knock." Heart pounding, Daniel crept forward, the floor creaking under his socks, each step a negotiation with fear. Josh gripped his arm, nails biting into skin. "Don't open it," he hissed, eyes darting to the windows, their curtains drawn tight against the unknown. "What if someone needs help?" Daniel countered, though doubt coiled in his gut like a snake. Who would wander here, in the dead of night, miles from any path? He cracked the door, the hinge squeaking like a warning, and a rush of cold air stung his face, carrying the scent of pine and something sharper, like damp earth disturbed. The flashlight's beam swept the campsite. Empty, the trees looming like silent judges, their branches clawing at the sky. Nothing stirred, not even the wind, the silence a living thing that pressed against his skin. He stepped onto the small porch, gravel crunching underfoot, the sound unnervingly loud. He scanned the darkness, the beam cutting through shadows, revealing nothing but the forest's endless edge. He was turning back, ready to chalk it up to nerves, when he saw it. A footprint, fresh in the dirt, inches from the RV's steps. It was human, yet wrong. Too large, the toes elongated and pointed, the heel unnaturally wide, as if pressed by a weight no man could bear. The beam lingered, the print seeming to pulse, a silent accusation carved in the earth. "Josh, get out here," Daniel called, his voice tight, barely his own. Josh stumbled out, his breath catching as he saw it. "What the hell is that?" The print mocked them, its edges sharp, untouched by the night's dew, as if it had been made moments ago. "We need to go," Josh said, his voice trembling. No trace of the bravado that had carried him through bar fights and bad decisions. Daniel nodded, the air too thick to breathe, the forest's gaze too heavy, like eyes boring into his skull. They scrambled inside, Josh fumbling with the ignition key, his hands shaking as if chilled by more than the night. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died, the sound of betrayal that echoed in the silence. "Come on," Josh yelled, slamming the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his face a map of panic. Daniel checked his phone. No bars, just a blank screen staring back, mocking their isolation with its useless glow. They sat in silence, breaths shallow, eyes darting to every shadow that flickered across the curtains. The RV felt like a trap, its walls too thin, its windows too frail against whatever waited outside. The forest was a void, swallowing sound, amplifying fear. At one point, rustling circled the RV, slow, deliberate, like footsteps pacing just beyond the flashlight's reach. Neither dared look, their hands clenched, sweat beading despite the cold, the air inside the RV growing stale with their fear. Hours dragged, each minute a test of nerve, the silence a blade held to their throats. Daniel dozed fitfully, jerking awake to Josh's panicked whisper, "Get up, someone's out there." Through a slit in the curtains, a sliver of moonlight revealed movement. A figure, tall and indistinct, gliding between the pines. It didn't run, didn't hide. It approached, its steps measured, its purpose a cold certainty that tightened Daniel's chest. Josh tried the ignition again, cursing under his breath, his voice a raw edge of desperation. This time, the engine roared, a lifeline stitched into the dark. "Go!" Daniel shouted, gripping the seat as the RV lurched forward, tires spitting gravel like shrapnel. Through the rear window, he glimpsed the figure break into a run, its form blurring into the trees, swallowed by the night's hungry embrace. They didn't speak, didn't stop, driving through the gray light of dawn until they reached a diner in a small town, its neon sign flickering like a promise of safety, however fleeting. Over coffee, they sat in silence, the night's weight pressing down like a physical force. A waitress, her apron stained with grease and her smile worn thin, dropped a newspaper on the table. The headline was stark, black ink screaming against the page. "Local man found dead in Pine Barrens. Foul play suspected." "Creepy place, those woods," she said, her voice light but her eyes sharp, as if she knew more than she let on. "You boys see anything strange out there?" Daniel's throat tightened, words failing him, his mind replaying the knock, the footprint, the figure's silent pursuit. What could he say? That a mark too vast for a man had scarred their camp? That knocks had echoed with no source, a prelude to a terror they'd barely outrun? They paid and left, the question hanging like smoke in the air. The Pine Barrens had bared its teeth, and Daniel vowed never to return, though the rhythm of those knocks lingered, a pulse he couldn't silence, a heartbeat he carried into every quiet night thereafter. Leigh Ellis was a man forged in solitude's fire, his early 40s marked by a marriage that crumbled and jobs that left him hollow. In the autumn of 1987, his RV, a battered relic he dubbed Old Girl, its paint chipped and its frame creaking with every mile, carried him to the fringes of Zion National Park, Utah. The desert was his cathedral, its red rock cliffs rising like altars, its sparse junipers whispering absolution no city could offer. "Out here, you're nothing and everything," Leigh would say, his voice rough as the sandstone he loved, his eyes scanning horizons for truths he couldn't name. He parked far from the crowded campgrounds, seeking a silence unbroken by the chatter of tourists or the hum of rangers' radios. The first night was a sacrament. Stars spilled across the sky like shattered diamonds, a cool breeze slipping through the RV's open windows, and the desert's murmurs. Coyotes calling, brush rustling, lulling him into a dreamless sleep that felt like forgiveness. Morning brought coffee brewed on a camp stove, the scent mingling with sage and dust, the cliffs glowing pink in the dawn. Leigh hiked a trail that snaked through canyons, the sun warming his shoulders, the earth firm beneath his boots, each step a shedding of the past. He returned at dusk, legs heavy from miles walked, craving a beer by the fire, the simplicity of routine a balm for a heart still bruised. But as he approached the RV, his breath caught. The door hung open, swaying gently in the wind, its latch glinting in the fading light. He always locked it. The handle was stubborn, requiring a hard pull that left his palm sore. "Damn it," he muttered, blaming his haste, though a worm of doubt burrowed deep, its wriggling a warning he couldn't ignore. Inside, nothing was amiss. No scattered gear, no missing wallet, his books still stacked neatly on the counter. Yet the air felt violated, as if someone had lingered, their presence a stain on the space, a fingerprint left on silence. Shaking it off, Leigh locked the door with a force that rattled the frame and built a fire, its flames a small rebellion against the gathering dark. He sat, beer in hand, the cliffs looming like silent judges, their shadows stretching across the sand. As night deepened, footsteps broke the quiet, heavy, deliberate, not the skitter of coyotes or the shuffle of javelinas, but the tread of something purposeful. Leigh froze, his bottle halfway to his lips, scanning the darkness beyond the fire's glow, where the desert seemed to hold its breath. "Hello? Anyone there?" he called, his voice flat against the vastness, swallowed by the cliff's indifference. Silence answered, but his pulse quickened, the fire's crackle now a taunt, its light too weak to pierce the night's veil. The steps faded, leaving only the desert's weight, its shadows twisting into shapes that seemed to watch, their edges fluid, alive. He retreated to the RV, double-checking the locks, the window's curtains drawn tight, their fabric a flimsy shield against the unknown. Sleep was a battle, every creak of the vehicle jerking him awake, his mind painting footsteps where none should be, the desert's calm now a mask he couldn't trust. Morning's light offered no solace. The unease clung like dust, gritty and inescapable. Seeking distraction, Lay set out for a remote canyon, a place whispered about by an old park regular. A cave, hidden from maps, nestled deep in the rock like a secret the desert guarded fiercely. The hike was punishing, the sun a hammer on his back, the trail a maze of loose stone and thorned brush. He found it. A dark slit in the cliff, barely wide enough for a man, its edges jagged as if torn by some ancient force. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with centuries undisturbed, the temperature dropping sharply, a chill that seeped into his bones. His flashlight revealed carvings, swirling patterns, etched deep into the stone, their curves disorienting, as if they shifted in the beam's flicker, pulling his eyes into their spirals. The deeper he ventured, the denser they grew, the air thicker, the cold a living thing that pressed against his chest. A shuffling sound stopped him, something dragging, slow and heavy. From the darkness ahead, not footsteps but a weight sliding across stone. The cave's walls seemed to close in, the carvings pulsing like veins, the air thick with a presence he couldn't see but felt, a gaze that bore into his skull. Panic clawed at him, raw and primal. He turned and ran, stumbling over rocks, the open desert's heat a lifeline as he burst free, his breath ragged, his shirt soaked with sweat. Back at the RV, he laughed. A brittle, hollow sound, blaming exhaustion, dehydration, the cave's oppressive dark. He grilled dinner, the sizzle of meat grounding him, the routine a tether to normalcy. But the desert's calm felt like a lie, its vastness a stage for something unseen. At midnight, a thump shook the RV, heavy, intentional, like a fist against metal, the sound reverberating in the small space. Lay grabbed his flashlight, its beam trembling as he aimed it at the window, his hands slick with sweat. Outside, a figure stood hunched unnaturally tall, its limbs stretched like twisted branches, its skin pale and taut over bone, glinting in the moonlight like wet clay. Its face was a void, a smooth expanse where eyes and mouth should be, tilting as if curious, as if it saw him through that blank mask, its head cocking with an insect-like precision that turned his stomach. Lay stumbled back, knocking over a chair, its crash deafening in the silence. His throat closing, his breath came in shallow gasps. His hands fumbled for the keys, fingers numb, the metal cold against his palm. The engine roared, the RV lurching forward, dust clouding the rearview mirror like a storm. For a moment, the figure stood in the road, motionless, watching with that eyeless gaze, then melted into the night, its form dissolving into the desert's shadows. Lay drove 30 miles to a gas station, where he sat until dawn, hands shaking, the clerk's curious glance unanswered. Her question, "You okay, mister?" met with silence. The desert had betrayed him, its vastness no longer a sanctuary but a hunting ground, its silence a predator's cloak. Lay sold old girl a month later, trading freedom for walls that didn't creak, but the memory of that faceless sentinel followed him. A shadow no highway could outrun, a presence that lingered in every darkened window. Caleb, a grizzled outdoorsman whose 50-odd years had etched lines deep as canyons into his face, had roamed North America's backwoods for decades, his RV a sanctuary on wheels, its dents and scratches a map of his life. In October, he found himself at Raccoon Falls, a remote campground where a waterfall's roar drowned the world and mist wove through the pines like ghosts, curling around trunks in the early light. Caleb, whose beard was streaked with gray and whose hands bore the scars of hard winters and harder choices, cherished such places, raw, untouched, far from the clamor of city folk chasing Instagram shots. "The wild's honest," he'd say, his voice low, carrying the weight of a man who'd seen the world's edges and lived to tell it. He parked near the river, its song a steady hum that vibrated in his chest, and set up camp with a fire, a folding chair, and a bottle of whiskey, the air sharp with pine and damp earth, the kind of scent that made you feel alive. The first nights passed quietly, though a stillness hung heavier than usual, pressing against his senses like a storm waiting to break. Max, his half-shepherd mutt, grew restless, his amber eyes fixed on the dark beyond the fire's glow, his ears twitching at sounds Caleb couldn't hear. Caleb brushed it off. Solitude played tricks, made shadows dance where none should be, turned wind into whispers. On the third night, footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, crunched through the underbrush, the sound cutting through the waterfall's drone like a blade. Caleb grabbed his flashlight, its beams slicing the night, revealing nothing but pines and mist. "Anyone out there?" he called, his voice thin, swallowed by the forest's vastness. Silence answered, but Max's low growl said otherwise, his hackles rising, his body taut as a bowstring. Dawn revealed footprints, barefoot, wide, their toes unnaturally long, pressed deep into the mud as if by a weight that defied reason. They circled the RV like a noose, a silent claim on the space, leading into the woods and vanishing in the dense brush. Caleb's gut twisted. No one hiked barefoot here, not in October's bite, not on ground sharp with pine cones and stones. He checked nearby camps, his boots heavy with dread. An older couple's tent stood empty, their fishing rods propped against a tree, their fire pit cold as death. A group of college kids had vanished, their campsite a chaos of scattered gear. Backpacks unzipped, beer cans crushed, a lone shoe abandoned in the dirt. Their fire pit ash, as if they'd fled in haste. "People don't just walk away," Caleb muttered. The forest's silence now a threat, its calm a mask hiding teeth. That night, the footsteps returned, closer, circling tighter, the crunch of leaves deliberate, mocking. Caleb gripped his hunting knife, its handle worn smooth by years of use, Max's growl vibrating the air like a warning bell. The fire's light cast shadows that twisted, too tall, too sharp, their edges bleeding into the dark. "Who's there?" he shouted, stepping outside, flashlight shaking in his hand, its beam swallowed by the tree's embrace. A shape darted between pines, tall, impossibly fast, gone before he could pin it with light or thought. The forest held its breath, the waterfall's roar fading to a distant murmur, the air thick with a presence that pressed against his skin, heavy as grief. At dawn, Caleb found not footprints but blood, a clean, deliberate trail, its redness stark against the earth, leading into the woods like a beckoning hand. Against every instinct, he followed, the pines closing in, their needles muffling his steps, the air growing thick with the scent of decay, sharp and sour. The trail wound deeper, the forest denser, the waterfall's voice fading to a whisper, as if the world itself retreated. It ended at a cabin, its wood rotting, moss choking its frame like a shroud, the door ajar, swaying on rusted hinges. Inside, the stench of spoiled meat hit him like a fist, thick enough to gag, the air heavy with wrongness. A table bore a smear of blood, fresh and glistening, its edges pooling in the grain of the wood. A man stood at the far end, tall, gaunt, his tattered coat stained with filth, a long knife in his hand, its blade catching the light through a cracked window, glinting like a promise of pain. He didn't turn, didn't speak, his focus on the table's unseen burden, his shoulders hunched as if bearing a weight only he could feel. Caleb backed away, heart hammering, his boots silent on the dirt floor, but a floorboard groaned underfoot, a sound loud as a gunshot in the stillness. The man's head snapped up, eyes wild, a grin twisting his pale face like a wound, his teeth bared in a mockery of welcome. Caleb ran, the man's footsteps pounding behind, branches snapping like bones in pursuit. He reached the RV, lungs burning, hands shaking as he fumbled the key, the engine roaring as he floored it, the dirt road blurring beneath him, the cabin's shadow shrinking in the rearview mirror. In town, he learned the other campers never returned. No trace, no tracks, their absence a hole in the world. Rangers found the cabin empty. No blood, no man, no answers, just rotting wood and silence. Caleb sold his RV. The forest's call silenced, its freedom tainted by a truth he couldn't unsee. But the crunch of those footsteps echoed in his dreams, a reminder that some silences hunt, their hunger patient, their gaze eternal. Sarah, a woman in her mid-30s whose dark hair framed a face etched with quiet resolve, sought refuge in Pennsylvania's Allegheny National Forest. Her RV, Harriet, was a rusted haven, its dents a testament to years of escape from a past she rarely spoke of. A broken engagement, a job that drained her soul, a life that felt like a cage. The forest's oaks and maples, ablaze with autumn's fire, were a balm, their colors a promise of renewal. "No one asks questions out here," she'd say, her voice soft but firm, her eyes scanning the horizon for peace. She parked in a secluded clearing, 10 miles from the nearest road, the air cool with the scent of earth and leaf mold, a beer in hand as she watched the sun sink, painting the trees in gold and crimson, the light lingering like a lover's touch. At dusk, she walked an old logging road, the path narrow, its edges choked with ferns, the trees closing in like a tunnel, their branches weaving a canopy that dimmed the sky. Rustling, close, deliberate, stopped her cold, the sound not of deer or squirrels but of something heavier, pacing her steps with a rhythm that felt alive. "Deer," she thought, her voice a whisper to herself, but the sound shadowed her, a mirror to her stride, its cadence too precise for chance. Her pulse quickened, the air heavy with decay, sharp and rancid, like meat left to rot under the sun. She hurried back, Harriet's silhouette a beacon in the twilight, but froze as she neared. The door was open, though she'd locked it tight, the bolts click a memory she could still hear in her mind. Inside, a smear of blood fresh, the size of a palm, stained the floor near the sink, its redness glaring against the RV's worn linoleum, the edges still wet, glistening in the dim light. Heart racing, Sarah checked every corner, every shadow, her breath shallow, her hands trembling as she gripped a kitchen knife, its blade too short to feel like protection. The bathroom door was ajar, though she'd left it closed. Pushing it open, she froze. A body lay curled in the shower, a man pale as bone, his chest torn open, ribs exposed like a grotesque flower, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, their light long gone. The stench choked her, while rising as she stumbled back, the knife slipping from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Rustling outside grew louder. Heavy footsteps, circling, closing in, the crunch of leaves deliberate, a hunter's tread. Sarah slammed the door, locking it, her hands shaking as she fumbled the bolt, the metal cold against her skin. The handle rattled, something testing its strength, the sound of violation that echoed in her skull. She climbed into the driver's seat, the key shaking in her hand, the engine roaring as she floored it, branches clawing at Harriet's sides like fingers desperate to hold her back. On the main road, she stopped, breath ragged, the forest's eyes still on her, their weight a presence she couldn't shake. Police found the body, a drifter, cause of death unknown, his wounds unlike any animal's, too precise, too cruel. No tracks, no signs, only questions that hung like fog. Sarah sold Harriet, the forest's freedom a lie, its promise of peace shattered by a horror she couldn't name. The rattle of that handle lingered, a scar she carried into every quiet moment, a sound that woke her in the night, her heart racing as if the door might open still. Jason Keller and Mike Torres, tech workers in their late 20s whose lives revolved around code and deadlines, craved a break from the glow of screens and the hum of servers. In September, they rented an RV, a hulking beast that smelled of stale coffee and old vinyl, and headed to Washington's Olympic National Forest, where evergreens stood like ancient sentinels, their branches heavy with mist. The campground was empty, its fire rings cold, the silence profound, broken only by the wind's low moan through the trees. They parked in a clearing, the RV dwarfed by the forest's vastness, and spent the first day fishing a nearby river, their laughter echoing off the water, beers cracked open as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of fire and ash. The evening was idyllic, stories swapped by a fire pit, the flames casting shadows that danced like memories, the air sharp with pine and smoke. They slept soundly, the forests quiet a blanket that muffled the world. But at 1 a.m., scratching, deliberate, rhythmic, woke Mike, the sound scraping along the RV's metal side like nails on bone. "You hear that?" he whispered, shaking Jason awake, his voice tight with unease. Jason groaned, rubbing sleep from his eyes, but froze as a bang followed, shaking the RV's frame, the sound heavy, intentional, a demand for attention. Mike grabbed a flashlight, its beam trembling as he cracked the door, the cold air rushing in, carrying the scent of damp earth and something sharper, like rust. The beam revealed gashes in the metal, long, deep, too precise for claws, too cruel for chance, their edges glinting in the light, fresh as a wound. "What the hell?" Jason muttered, joining him, his kitchen knife a feeble shield in his hand. They scanned the darkness, the trees swallowing the light, their branches swaying as if whispering secrets. No footprints, no shadows, only the gashes, a message carved in steel. They locked up, sleepless, the forest stillness a suffocating weight, the air inside the RV thick with their fear. Every creak was a threat, every gust a step too close. Morning showed no signs, no tracks, no broken branches. The gashes glaring in the sunlight, their depth a silent accusation. They packed up, the RV's engine a lifeline, and drove out, the forest silence chasing them like a predator. At a gas station an hour away, Mike overheard locals murmur of vanishings. Same place, same guy. Their voices low, eyes darting as if the forest listened still. They drove on, the scratches a warning carved into their minds. The forest's calm revealed as a lie, its silence not peace but a hunter's pause. Travis Boone, a former construction worker whose back bore the scars of a workplace accident, had traded hammers for a laptop, freelancing from wherever the road took him. In his early 40s, he parked his RV near Lake Arrowhead, California, a place of childhood summers where the pines stood tall and the lake's quiet ripples soothed a heart still mending from life's blows. "The woods don't care who you were," he'd say, his voice warm but edged with weariness, his eyes scanning the water for peace. He arrived on a crisp evening, parking deep in the forest, far from weekend hikers, the air rich with pine and the promise of solitude. Burgers grilled on a portable stove, their sizzle a small joy, the sunset painting the lake in gold as he settled with a beer, the world shrinking to firelight and calm. But as night fell, a metallic, rotting smell soured the air, sharp enough to wrinkle his nose. The forest's hum of insects and distant owls snuffed out, replaced by a silence that felt alive, heavy with intent. Travis paused, his beer halfway to his lips, the fire's glow too weak to reach the tree line. A figure stood there, tall, its limbs unnaturally long, its silhouette wrong, as if stretched by some cruel hand. It didn't move, didn't breathe, its stillness a challenge. "You lost," Travis shouted, his voice steady despite the chill in his gut. But it didn't answer, didn't flinch. He grabbed his flashlight, its beam cutting through the dark, and aimed it at the figure. And it was gone, vanished as if the light had erased it, leaving only shadows and a racing pulse. Morning revealed footprints, clawed, three-toed, impossibly large. Beside drag marks in the dirt, deep grooves that spoke of something heavy pulled through the earth. Travis crouched, tracing their edges, his fingers trembling as he measured their size. Too vast for any animal he knew. He stayed put, his .38 revolver close, convincing himself it was a prank, a bear, anything but the truth. The day passed quietly, the forest's calm a fragile lie, but as dusk fell, a scream tore through the silence. High, animalistic, yet human in its pain, a sound that clawed at his nerves. Against his better judgment, he followed it, flashlight and gun in hand, the pines closing in, their branches snagging his jacket like hands. In a clearing, he found a body slumped against a tree, shredded, its head gone, the torso clawed open, blood soaking the earth in a dark pool. Travis gagged, the stench overwhelming, his mind reeling as he backed away. A snap behind him made him whirl, gun raised, and there it was, tall, skeletal, its limbs jerking like an insect's, its skin pale and taut, eyes glowing faintly in sunken sockets. It lunged, a claw slashing his arm, pain searing as the gun fell. Travis stumbled, kicking out, and the thing retreated, melting into the trees with a speed that defied reason. He ran, blood dripping, the RV's door a lifeline as he locked it, started the engine and sped away, the creature's pale form watching from the pines, its gaze await in the rearview mirror. He reached a town by dawn, his arm bandaged, the police skeptical but thorough. They found the body, no head, no answers, the wounds unlike any predator's. Travis never returned, the lake's beauty tainted, the scream a sound he carried into every quiet night, a reminder that the wild hunts, and its claws are sharp. These stories, etched across years and landscapes, weave a tapestry of dread that stretches from coast to coast. The Pine Barrens knocks, Zion's faceless watcher, Raccoon Fall's blood trail, each unmasks a wilderness alive with menace, its beauty a lure, its silence a blade. Daniel's footprint, Lay's cave, Caleb's grinning predator. They speak of forces that thrive where trails end, where light fails. Sarah's blood smear, Travis's clawed horror, Jason and Mike's gashes. They linger, scars on the soul that no road can erase. Could you stand against such shadows, your RV a lone sentinel in the dark? Would you hear the wild's whisper turn to a roar? The backcountry is no haven. It's a predator, its gaze eternal, its hunger a pulse that beats beneath the earth, waiting for those who stray too far from the light.